How we doing, everybody? And welcome to the second episode of Paul Talk Podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Gordon Duncan, the voice of Superscoreboard. Myself and Gordon have gone for a 2-for-1 jumper deal at Zara and have turned up wearing the same hoodie. But Gordon, thanks for coming and speaking. It was your face when we were outside and you went, we were in the same jumper. And I was like, yeah, we are.
I think it looks better on you, to be fair. Do you want to know the worst of this, right? I bought this, got a big stain on it. Didn't come out and went and bought another one. That's how much I like this hoodie. I've got 2 of these hoodies, one with a stain on.
Well, I think actually I've got a wee stain in the back. That's why I'm glad the camera doesn't look that way. But Gordon, thanks for coming, mate. I really appreciate you speaking to us. So, how's things been with yourself?
Good, yeah, can't complain. Just Scottish football never seems to take a lull. It's never really quiet. I mean, I always remember panicking a wee bit over the World Cup break, thinking, maybe be a bit quiet or a bit kind of take a bit of a lull, and it just doesn't. So the world just keeps us going, keeps us busy at night. I've got a wee one now as well, so she keeps me busy during the day, and if I get the odd wee window, I like to speak to people like you and do stuff like this, so it's all good fun. And shopping Zara.
The fort, that's where we go. On your, just a thing about your daughter there, like I've seen other podcasts you've been on where your daughter's, what's she, about a year, 2 years? And how do you find the balance of working at night? Because working at night and working at the weekends and then having your daughter during the day, because I've got 2 kids and I won't lie, if I had to have them during the day and then go to work at night, I'd punch myself in the face.
It's just probably just from the convention, it's just probably flipped in its head. So I feel really fortunate that like the vast majority of days, because I do work some days doing different bits and pieces with Sky and stuff, but the vast majority of days I get so much time that traditionally dads don't get. And then the payoff for that is I miss bath and bedtime, which sometimes can be quite good.
It's not that bad.
So the tragedy is like, if I open that door at 8:30 at night, I just open the front door, and if I hear her, I'm a little bit disappointed initially, and then I'm like, oh, well, I'll get to see her again. And her and I like I say, I am genuinely appreciative of, like, I get so much good time with her during the day. Do you know what I mean? I'm like the only dad. I go to the baby classes Thursday and Friday. I'm the only dad every week. The mums look at me as if I'm some sort of leper. They don't even speak to me. You would think I'd be like some sort of novelty, but it's like the opposite. Everybody just ignores me, and I just crack on with it. So it's good. It's really good fun.
Why is this man here ruining women time?
Exactly. And like there was one as well where I can't even remember the context, but they think nothing of like resorting to that, like typical men or blah blah blah, and I'm like, I'm sitting right here, great.
You just need to accept that you're outnumbered. I actually get a bit of that where because I do shift work, when I take my daughter to school, I'm always there. My wife works 8 to 4, so she's never there. And that, but my mate's actually the same. His daughter's in my daughter's class, and the 2 of us are always there. And we kind of joke like, do you think the mothers look at us and go, are they single dads? They poor guys raising those children themselves, which is quite far from it, because I'm always out doing stuff like this and disappear. But on your career, how did things start for you? I know that you've got a kind of journalistic background and stuff. How did this all begin for you?
I'd like the answer to be like less cliche, because probably sound a bit of a wank when you say like, oh, it was my dream job, but it genuinely was, right? I probably realised very quickly that I wasn't good enough to play football at about age 12, 13, and then straight away it became about talking about it. That was it. I was just like most boys, of our generation in the west of Scotland, like, I want to be a footballer. I'm like, no thinking of it. Then get to like 12 and they're like, no, that's not going to happen, is it? And why not talk about it? Or I tell a lie, write about it, I think was my initial sort of feeling. And honestly, that just grew. I remember, I've got one vivid memory of, and I remember that because the flat, like my family was living in at the time, so I must have been like 10, 11, 12 maybe, and like almost like putting together this fake match programme, like writing out some big table that didn't exist and making up a quiz and like writing it in and kind of stapling it together, which sounds unbelievable because I'm like the least creative person ever. And then I was able just to take little bit by bit steps. So even by the time I was in second year at school, work experience was the local newspaper. I remember getting sent to Asda for some reason, right, in the staff room at Asda. And Scott McDonald, Paul Quinn and Richie Foran, the 3 Motherwell players at the time, were there, and I was obviously buzzing about that. Got pictures taken. I also wrote some really stupid article about like a mini golf thing with Derek Ferguson. I have no idea. And then that made it as the free newspaper as well. And then just chipped away like that, did a bit at a local radio station, and then you're kind of asked to kind of take it a bit more seriously, I guess. It was kind of marrying it up then academically. So I actually went to uni. You'll be sorry you asked, this is the real boring stuff. I was studying like English and Spanish at Glasgow Uni with no real like thought of why or what I wanted to. I was good at them at school. It was simple as that. And then I was kind of getting some work at Superscoreboard at the weekends, and thought, right, it's time to sort of try and marry that stuff and forget about disappearing to Spain for a year, which I would have quite liked to have done, but it was at that point, that was quite a big decision for me then, right? Because I was about to go, I was like picking which parts of Spain to go to for the year. Right, scrap that, stay here, broadcast journalism at uni. And because I was already kind of getting in there at Clyde, once I finished uni, I went straight in, like, in fact, they kind of overlapped. I pretty much started working before I finished uni. And then at that point, you're just looking to make a nuisance of yourself and try and hang in there. So I would do anything. I've done news stuff, and I remember doing 18 weekends in a row, 18 Saturday nights in a row when I was 20, like, which is the worst age for that, you know, in the newsroom, and just doing whatever, basically hanging in there until, all right, there's a space for you to do a bit more sport, and then ultimately then move on to host the show.
What would the plans have been in Spain?
Just uni over there probably. So it shows you how little I can remember of it. So if you study a language to honours level, you do a year abroad basically. My wife actually did it as well. She went to Italy for a year because she was doing Italian, and I went over there and stayed with her and stuff like that. So that's it. If you're doing honours in a honours degree in a language, you spend, is it third year? I think third year abroad, basically. That's it.
See, so I didn't finish school, so I don't know. I don't know what you do when you're doing an
really
honours
bad
degree.
Explanation. I nearly know. But that was, and I remember like picking like, right, where's the sunniest bits? That was my mindset at the time. Like, and that's kind of like, I sometimes get asked to go back to schools and that and talk about like career paths and whatever. And that's why I just wouldn't get too hung up in it, because at one point that's the only reason I was doing English and Spanish, because I was good at it at school. Like, what a nonsense thought. Like, it wasn't going anywhere to get me a job or that. But do you know what? I don't regret it or anything. And maybe if I had the chance again, I would disappear to, I'm sure I ticked Gran Canaria for one. Do you know what I mean? Just like go for 6 months and top up the tank.
I suppose, but see, when you're at school and you're good at something, you kind of get pushed to do that because, well, you're good at it. I actually spoke to a couple of my mates about this recently, so I don't know if it would have been the same for yourself. We had one meeting with a guidance counsellor, like in 4th year or something. It was like, what are you going to do? And for me, like, I had played reserve football and stuff with Airdrie, and I was like, well, I want to be a football player. And I remember the guy going, aye, but what are you going to do? And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm 15 right now. I don't want you to tell me that, but I can imagine that you're just kind of pigeonholed into certain things. So obviously, you talk about the writing as something that you enjoyed, and then you're putting your fan magazine together. Yeah. How does that go from there to getting in with Clyde1? Like, I know Peter Martin was your neighbour because we spoke about this before. Yeah. How did that happen? Did you approach him, or did it just kind of speak to him over it?
So I think there was one layer below that which probably allowed me to, because like it allowed me to either, I can't even remember specifically if I asked him or if he asked me, but the layer that I added in between was going to do, there was a radio station called L107, Lanarkshire 107, and through a family friend, I mean, that's just like voluntary, like, you know, sort of, they were looking for someone to basically go to Motherwell games and do a half-time and full-time report over the phone, like literally just phone up. And so I did that, and then without realising at the time, it's just the exact same thing that I was then going to do on Superscoreboard. It's kind of the same thing I'd do on Sky Sports News, do you know what I mean? So the skill set was actually just getting probably built up without realising it. And then because Peter, who was a neighbour, knew that I was capable of doing that, although Superscoreboard's, it's a different kettle of fish in terms of profile and size, the actual role there, it was kind of was the same, and it was just an emergency thing. Someone was sick or something like that, last minute, Saturday morning, he asked me to go to a game. And I did it. So it was a St Mirren Dundee United game just towards the end of the Love Street era. I remember it going there, and it obviously went okay. And then that just kind of, next time they needed somebody, you just kind of grew arms and legs for there. So
how did you feel doing that first game?
I was shitting myself so much. I've had that feel. I remember just twice in my career that exact feeling. That day and the day I got the phone call to ask to host Superscoreboard, where I don't know what this says about my like belief levels or what as a but my first reaction's just like, oh no, I can't do that. Right, okay, take a minute, right, think about that, right? But you also can't say no. Say no would be way worse. So just think about it and just give it a bash. So those were the 2 days, because I was, it's like still terribly tried to play. I think I still do at times. Terribly tried to play amateur football on Saturday morning. My game was off, sitting in a huff. It was the winter, and he phoned, "Can you go and do this St Mirren Dundee United game in the afternoon?" I'm like, I want to say no, but I don't want to say no at the same time. I was so nervous. Like, I remember one of the engineers had to drive over to Love Street as well and like set up the equipment for me, which is just laughable. See now, but like you just never do that. I don't even think I remember like forgetting a pen and paper. I like found a bit of paper in my bag and I was panicking about the pronunciation of like some Dundee United player and stuff like that. And then just it's like anything, looking back, and it's so silly.
What's the thought process? Like, you're saying that and the day that you got the main job, a lot of people have self-doubt, and it's something that's funny. Like, my wife gets annoyed at me with this, where, I do the other podcast that I do and I love it and I'm so comfortable speaking to it, but it's about football, so it's very comfortable.
Yeah.
See the self-doubt I've had to do this podcast, like the amount of times I've been like, I've been like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this at all. But I wanted it, and I like talking to people like yourself, and I enjoy it. What's your thought process when you're saying, oh no, I don't want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a little bit, it must be fear of failure or something like that. I remember specifically when, because the Superscoreboard was in a pretty good place when I got asked to take over. So then my gut reaction is like, oh, what if the show regresses then? And even if it didn't, but even if it did, that wouldn't even have been only my fault. Do you know what I mean? There is a lot goes into it, because I don't take all the praise if the show goes well, so I shouldn't really take all the stick if it goes down the way. But I think that was probably my thought. And they were just like, well, we're going to like just sack you if the listener figures dip slightly for the first couple of months, which they, like I say, they didn't anyway. But probably that, just fear of failure. Yeah, people maybe have that, and I don't get that massively, I don't think, but maybe just that initial. It's just that initial moment, isn't it? I think you just don't want to make an arse of it. I think
you always have self-doubt. Doesn't matter who you are, you're always going to have self-doubt.
Yeah.
You're saying like the viewing figures are going to drop, whatever. I remember watching, I think it was it 2006 or 2010, the World Cup was in Brazil, and I remember Jamie Carragher had just finished playing, and he did the panel for ITV, and I remember thinking, he's terrible, like he's awful. And then funnily enough, like you're saying, oh, they're not going to sack you, because these people know that you might not be particularly good to start with. When you look at Jamie Carragher now, him and Gary Neville are basically the best duo that Sky have got. Do you have did you have that doubt? They're saying, oh, I could be bad at this, and then they'll let me go. And I suppose you've got to have a bit of faith as well that these people know what they're talking about.
That's the weird thing, is I never actually, like, I've got self-doubt, but not that much self-doubt. Like, I still felt like I could do it. Do you know what I mean? I still felt like deep down I could, but it was more just that bigger picture of like, what if people don't like it, or what if it overall there's this perception that it's not as successful as it could be. But I still knew that I could do it, if that makes sense. So that's what pulls me back quite quickly. Like, I didn't knock it back. Do you know what I mean? There's a reason that was just an initial thing. And I had stood in and hosted maybe like, I don't know, 2 or 3 individual episodes of the show prior to that. So that gave me a bit of faith that I could, it's not that scary, and I could do it probably.
See, when you're doing like the St Mirren Dundee United game, like I would listen to the Superscoreboard when I was going to games with my dad when I was younger and stuff. You're talking about earlier about it's not that difficult in a sense. You're just reporting on what you've seen. Did you feel comfortable or is that kind of, I'm kind of going around in circles here, is that kind of what it is? You watch the game and then you're literally just saying what you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. And people find their own way of doing that, their own style. It's like everything, like, when the stabilizers come off that day, I probably wrote it down word for word and then just read it back. I'm quite a fast reader. I can kind of make it sound like I'm not reading it, because then that's like the biggest mistake. Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear it sound like you're reading it. And then now I would not even dream of writing just a couple of, in fact, I'd maybe even do it off the top of my head, which is a bit risky, but would possibly do that, or at the most a couple of sort of bullet points. And then you're just worried about, probably at that stage, then your biggest fear is because you catastrophize everything. You think like if you were to stumble over a word, like that's the end of the world. So that would be like the biggest learning curve. Actually hosting Super Scoreboard in a weird way is like, it's less stressful than, here's a better example, sorry. So see on Sky, we'll do a lot of live stuff, and we do it as live, or we record it and pretend that it's live, and it's way harder. It is way harder because I'm so used to just being live on the radio every night for hours at a time. So if I stumble over a word, I just carry on, or I make a joke out of it, or pretend that it didn't happen. Not pretend, in fact, own it. The opposite of pretending it didn't happen, just kind of own it, laugh about it. If you know that it's been recorded, you then almost start aiming for perfection. Yeah. And then the tiniest stumble, the tiniest mispronunciation sort of throws you off. So that's why I actually much prefer just doing live stuff than recording it.
I suppose, particularly with the unit that you've got just now and at Clyde1, these are mates, and it's a lot easier to make it conversational. I think that's something that people enjoy. Yeah. We'll go back onto the Super Scoreboard. How did the Sky thing come about?
Just boring. They just phoned me one day in the summer. That was it. And it actually came at a really nice time, probably because I always knew that I never just like anything in life, I love Super Scoreboard, but I don't know, like one day they'll probably be fed up of me, do you know what I mean? Or I'll get fed up of them, and it'll come to an end, and what am I going to do next? And it was all, when I took the job, it was always like, you don't want to just, that's all that you've ever done, or that's all you can ever do. But see, at the same time, I'm like, no, I don't know if this is a bad thing or not. I'm just not aggressively ambitious, right? Like, I'm ambitious enough. Like, I like my job, I like my career, but I like loads of other things just the same. Do you know what I mean? Like, see the thought of like moving away to chase a job or whatever. Like, so I was at the end of year 4, so I kind of do like kind of almost 2-year contracts sort of thing at Super Scoreboard. So I was at the end of year 4 thinking, right, you need to get your finger out, because you've got all this free time. We spoke about the kid earlier, right? But apart from that, you've got all this free time. Technically, I'm freelance journalist. I'm self-employed. I can do other stuff if I want. And you don't really do anything else. Why are you not trying to? And then it was like, should I be like chapping down doors and stuff like that? But then that's so hard, right? Because how do you go to someone and say, right, hire me, can I do some work for you? Oh, but by the way, I'm unavailable every night and every Saturday. Like, they'd be like, trace yourself. So it was just so fortunate, honestly, completely out of the blue. Someone I had never spoken to in my life phoned me and just said, would you come and do some work this season? And we know you do Super Scoreboard, so don't worry, like, that won't clash. And happy days. Perfect. You know what I mean? So,
see, when you get the phone call, I've been involved with a lot of teams where you would get somebody, I know it's slightly different because it's a professional environment, where you would get somebody that would pretend to be a reporter or pretend to, I don't know, be a manager in our team, and be like, do you want to come down to training, wear your suit?
Stitch up. No, it was like, it's going to sound like I'm insulting somebody at Sky here, which I'm not my intention. If somebody phoned and said, like, we need you to sit in for Jeff Stelling this weekend, I'd be like, you're at it. But listen, we might need somebody to go to the St Mirren press conference on Friday. It was a bit more believable, so it was all good.
Maybe it was just a better wind up. See, when you're doing Sky stuff like you're talking about, it's recorded and you want it to be kind of everything to be perfect. How often do you get that chance? Like, you see Rahman on STV, he's always in front of Parkhead or Ibrox. Is that kind of the stuff that you're doing all the time, or is it mainly going to press conferences?
Yeah, like, it just varies. Like, because they've got members of staff there that are like, full-time members of staff, and other guys that do other freelance. So I'm not involved all the time. It maybe, I don't know, over the last 2 years, it's a year and a half, it averages out like, I don't know, once a week, couple of times a week, and just varies. Yeah, it could be it could be standing outside Ibrox or Celtic Park and like reviewing the weekend's action with a guest, or like reporting on whatever it was. Like, I think I remember being outside Ibrox a good few days in a row when Steven Gerrard left and Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was coming in doing that. And then yesterday I was at Michael Beale's press conference, and there was no need to then go on live after that. I think we did do something in the morning, but you'll then do the press conference, you'll then speak to somebody in London who'll say, yeah, that sounds like it was a really blockbuster press conference, so will you come on live and sort of introduce it? Or they don't want that. It's quite fluid. And it's been good because, like, Super Scoreboard revolves around Celtic and Rangers for good reason. Like it's I've no problem with that, supply and demand. But Sky, occasionally I'll get the chance to maybe do something golf related or something rugby related or something women's football related, or just something a bit different. So it's been good.
As you say, golf related. That's partly what I'd imagine, you might not tell your wife this, but I'd imagine that's a huge part of why you particularly like what you do, that you get to go and play golf quite regularly.
I certainly used to. Again, like there's a theme developing here. Before my daughter was born, I would play a lot.
So with the job you do, that's probably part of the reason why you've not moved on, is because you have so much free time, and you won't tell your wife this, but you got a lot of time for golf.
I used to before Sophia was born, certainly. And by the way, I'm not even any good either. That's the scary thing.
What's your handicap?
See the amount of time I've played versus like how bad I am. It's terrible. And that's she'll be like, you should be better than that. No, but I don't get the chance to play anymore as much since she was born. But at the start, I was milking it. It was amazing. Like, and that's why, again, like for me, work-life balance is like so important. So doing Super Scoreboard's great, but what's really also great about it is the balance that it gave me, just to be able to go and not do what I wanted. No, in fact, I do what I wanted during the day. So especially when the summer would come, and then there's no point shying away from it as well. You get to meet some interesting people that invite you to nice places to play golf as well. And Gordon DL's like the biggest chancer of all time. So with him in tow, we get to some good places. And it's good. But I think she kind of, I'll try and play on that a bit as well. But I need to go. I mean, it's a golf day, or it's
work related.
I need to go and meet someone. And like I remember there was a brief, a couple of months we were in between houses there, waiting on our house getting finished, and we stayed with my mum. And I remember I got a call like in the morning, really early, being like, look, so and so's pulled out of this golf day at Glen Eagles, like, do you fancy it? And I'm like, of course I do. And then I'm like, right, how do I play this? So I thought the wee one. And then I remember sort of standing outside one room that I knew my mum was in, and then I knew that my wife could hear. And I'm like, Mum, I've just been asked to go to Glen Eagles. Could any chance you can keep Sophie? And my mum's like, of course, son. You've got that baby every day. You go and enjoy yourself. And I can just see my wife's face, like shaking her head. It's that sort of thing. I
feel for your wife. She probably gets similar to what my wife gets, where she's at work all day, and then she'll have to come back, and she'll be a mum when she gets in and on her own for most of the time, and you're away. But I do that with what you did with your mum. I do that with mine. But with my mum, it's a different technique you use. You play it as, I don't know if you need a rest or if you can't do this. And she's like, oh, I'll do it. I'll take her for a week.
Totally.
It's not probably like just kind of manipulate the situation, but that's when you're the boy, then exactly, you get away with it.
Mummy's boy never wears off.
Who's the best player that you've played with in terms of a footballing related person that you've played golf with?
See, I've never been lucky enough to, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I don't know if people know that, almost like the legend Callum Davidson, you know how good he is.
He plays up like, is it plus something?
So I remember I was at a golf day with him before, but we were in different groups, and I was choking just to see how good he was. Because I remember doing the Scottish Cup draw with him, and I just knew he was a golfer, so I'm like, right, small talk. Right, oh, Callum, how's the golf? And his answer will like infuriate me forever. He was just like, I'm not getting the chance to play as much, but my scores are still really good. So he's like, I just broke the course record at Dunblane. I shot 62, and I'm like, what? Like, how is that possible? And he's meant to be incredible. I'm trying to think. Good question. So in terms of being bang at it, I'm thinking like low handicappers and stuff like that. I mean, he's definitely the best that I'm aware of, and that's become like my thing. See, because I'm quite into playing golf, and obviously there's the football. I'm always saying to like Andy Halliday or whatever, and I was like, who's the best golfer at Hearts? That's like my question, like who's the best whatever. And I'm like, who's the best golfer in the Scottish Premiership? You know, like, no. People keep telling me that like Rory McKenzie at Kilmarnock, he's amazing. Apparently he's proper good as well, and some other boys. It'll be there'll be lower league, right? I'd love to give you massive names here. I know you like your lower league football anyway. So I played with a couple, Ross McLean, who plays with Dumbarton, and Louis Longridge. I played with both of them on the same day, and I think they're both like one or two handicappers. They're both good. I played with Ross a few times actually.
I think it's frustrating playing people like that. I'll name drop my mate Alan Russell is a right good golfer. So I think he was like, he's for Clyde1.
Right.
He had one shot away for the course record at Dalmuir. So me and him would play, and I'm shocking. I like to play, but I'm terrible. Like if I break 100, I'm like, it's been a good day. I was like 110 one day, and he shot like 73 or 74. And he's an angry wee guy. We both played at Maryhill together, and he's an angry wee guy, and he just gets so throwing his clubs up like, ow, you've just shot 2 over. I was like, why are you angry? I'm like, I've shot 40 over and I've had a great day.
Gordon Dalziel's very, very consistent as well, to be fair. He's probably came back to it a bit late to be like, to get like extremely low, but so he didn't play for years, and then I remember it was him and I, we just were like, I was like, fancy got a game of golf, and went up to Dale Park, 9 holes, and he was like, I've not played golf in years, and I think he used to be good, and see now it's like my fault. He's like addicted. He plays every day, and he got a hip replacement, and in the space of a year, he's in the space of one golf season, his handicap was 16 down to 8 in one, and he now sits around about he's really consistent, to be fair. He's as consistent as MD, but it's just because he's 60, whatever he is, he'll kill me for getting it wrong. 60 until next week he is. So like, you know, in terms, I don't know if he could ever get that really low, you lose a bit of that distance or whatever, but he's I
was going to say, is he 60? I suppose now is not that old, but particularly as we get older, it doesn't appear to be as old. But is he that kind of, you know, it's like when you see the old guys at the club and they just drive it 150 yards every time straight to die?
He's not there yet. He's still decent actually. Yeah, he's still got a fair bit of distance, and he's big into like whatever the next club is on the market. He'll go and get half price off somebody. He's big on that. So he's not at that stage yet. I do remember when we first went, we were first kind of playing, so he wasn't that into it yet. Now he's got more golf gear than you can imagine, all the bags, the clubs, the shoes, everything. But when we first went, right, he's turned up with this Loch Lomond bag that he's been given at some event, so showing off that he's played at Loch Lomond before, but years ago, right? It's a wee pencil bag at the hole in the bottom, and he was plugging the hole with a tammy, right? So the tammy was like stuffed into the hole so nothing would fall out, and it was a roasting hot day up at Dale Park, and he had just, you know, like just like a round neck Nike t-shirt, just like the type of thing you would wear to the gym or whatever, and he had it rolled up like a tank top because it was roasting, and then he marked his ball with a sleeve of paracetamol. It was unbelievable. I could not stop laughing. It was when he went into his pocket and just pulled out this sleeve of paracetamol and put it down, and now he's the opposite. Now he's got like all the gear. Like
that's like a guy that you would see playing at a council course or something.
Dale Park's it was good for that, because you kind of you're probably not allowed as such, but it's a bit more relaxed.
On Gordon DL, and obviously you have him and Mark Wilson on a Thursday night that make a great pairing. What is it like to work with these guys? Hugh Keevans as well, who is slightly different for they two. But how is it like to work with a group of guys like that who are so different as well?
Yeah, I think that's probably the key to it though. It's that kind of like jigsaw almost. I think if they were all like Gordon DL, the show would be an absolute shambles. But if they were all like Hugh, it would be equally shambolic in a different way. And it's just about trying to blend everything together. You know, it's like a cliche, like it's like a kind of football team or whatever, you know, like getting different personalities, different characters, different strengths, finding out what relationships work and what don't. Because like on paper, I know traditionally we would always have like erred away from 2 footballers together. Like the sort of aim was generally like, if you're having like a journalist to give you a journalistic side and a player to give you that side, and then mix those two. That, you know, for years it would be like Hugh and Derek sort of thing. And then Mark and Gordon just worked. Like it's not to say that it does still have its challenges. That see if there's a night there's like a really serious story's broken or something like that, and then I feel like it needs a journalistic touch, I'm always a bit like, right, how do we work this? But 99% of the time, their chemistry just works. You know what I mean? It just does. Like anecdotally, everybody who stops you says, "Oh, they two are so daft" or whatever, and then that's probably backed up by listening figures and stuff like that. And then like Hugh just brings like well, there's nobody like Hugh. Do you know what I mean? So like literally nobody, like irreplaceable. And then like again, journalistic touch with Roger Hanna, who just knows everything.
That's ridiculous, his knowledge.
Crazy. And then like if you're at then guys who is so invaluable, see having Andy Halliday, then just to slightly different extent, Marvin Bartley, Kenny Miller guys. Oh yeah, I played against him, I played under him. Like that's just what you want. Just want that mix. So I love it. It's great, and it's been good to add that freshness because people will kind of, I think it's easy to fall into a misconception that like, oh, it's just the same pundits. But see, over the 6 years I've done it, it's changed dramatically. You've got the core has maybe like remained, but I always like think, and I always really admire guys who can come in, because I think it is a unique environment. Like it or love it, I've got no problem with that. I don't care. Like it, love it or hate it, I should say. I don't mind if people hate it. That's cool. But it's it's a very unique environment. So see, if I always think like Marvin's a great example of this, just come in quite recently, quite fresh, and just embraces what it is. To have a laugh at yourself, have a bit of fun, don't take it too seriously, have a bit of fun with the quiz, like take a bit of stick if you lose, give people a bit of stick if you win, and they just embrace it. So it's good.
I think guys like Andy Halliday, I think Andy Halliday's excellent. I think he's, even though he's a Rangers man, which is opposite end for me, I think he gives as unbiased view as you possibly can. I think he's pretty good. I think Marvin Bartley's another one that's very good. It does need that kind of range of different people, I suppose, and with Gordon and Mark only being one proper night a week, I suppose.
They're now two, to be fair. So we've upped Tuesday, it. We've upped it again on the back of that. So it was like people seem to love Thursdays, and so that's not my decision as such. Like, so it was the summer there. Like, we're gonna go twice a week. And I was like, kind of like one part of me is like, right, okay.
Is it more work for you with it too?
No. I must admit, overall, it's not. You get that odd night, like I mentioned, every now and then, where the subject matter's just a bit deeper. But by and large, nah. Because I know when they spend 20 minutes a show banging on about whatever Gordon's been up to that day, so it's easier. Nah, it's easy.
Hugh Keevins he's a kind of stalwart. He's always been there forever. Yeah. See, for me with Hugh, he sensationalises pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And what I like, I suppose, is he doesn't seem to mind how wrong he gets it, how often. He just keeps sensationalising. If he gets it wrong, he'll just sensationalise it the next time for something else. What's it like working with him?
I genuinely like that though. Like, people think that he says it to wind people up, and I used to maybe sort of think that, but the more time goes on, I'm definitely coming away from it. He just says what he thinks. What more can you ask for? Do you know what I mean? Of all the pundits, like, and he would probably say this as well in a totally healthy way, he's the one I disagree with the most, for sure. And then that's good fun for me, because then I'll just disagree with him. There'll be other pundits who, even if I do kind of agree with what they're saying, I might need to look at the other side of the argument to balance it, whatever. I think everybody knows the way the role works. And Hugh and I are obviously totally different era, and see loads of things differently. But he genuinely is just like that. He just says what he thinks. He doesn't care.
I do love the way he kind of pronounces certain things as well. I think issues.
I think
that's quite funny.
Issues is a good one. There's a few, and I'll sometimes kind of try and copy them back, but I can't. There's only one.
You kind of touched on it there, where sometimes you'll disagree with him, or there's sometimes you'll agree with other pundits, but you need to be mindful of what the call's saying. Your role is you're almost a mediator between that. Do you find it easier being a Motherwell fan, where the heated debates generally come for Celtic and Rangers? Do you find it easier not to get het up about it, because, well, ultimately they're not your team, so it's not something that's so important to you that...
I think that helps. I mean, there's the sort of... I do go around in circles on that issue sometimes when people ask me, because it's like, if people don't believe you're a Motherwell fan anyway, then is it beneficial? But I think there's probably, there will be a silent majority who just accept it and then take it from a good place. And I'll always say that. It's like, it's the most common thing. 6 years down, 1,500 shows, I reckon, right, by the end of this season. See if you're still, if all you've got for me is still this belief that I secretly favour your rival over, are you honestly going to need to do more for me than that? Because that became water off a duck's back at show 50, never mind 1,500. So if that's the basis of your argument, I'm not even on that level of being able to care or sort of debate that. I always think about it on Twitter. It's like when people say, you're kid on Motherwell fan or whatever, I'm like, right, I've got two choices here. I can go back through my phone and attach all these pictures of me at age 4, 6, 7, 9, 15, 19 in Motherwell strips, travelling abroad to see the team in Europe, being a ball boy, birthdays, Christmases, new strip. I can just send them all back to this guy and go, shut it, there you go. Or I'm like, no, but why on earth did I do that? Why on earth? Do you know what I mean?
I think it's possibly the most elaborate hoax that you've ever created.
It started at age 4. Do you know what I mean?
You knew it was going to happen. But what team do you?
Exactly, that's it. And it'll never go away. And it's like you become so. You do genuinely because it's funny because Hugh, I think, makes no secret of having been brought up a Celtic fan, and he's got this phrase where he's like, I'm too green for the blue half of Glasgow and I'm not green enough for the green. I think that's a good saying. So, but I genuinely believe he has now, for years of doing the job, he's just battle hardened, he's separate. So for me, who was never in that anyway, I'm certainly like that. I'm like, I just totally, like, so last year, anytime they're in Europe, I've got no problem cheering them both on. I'll say cheering. I'm going to cheer, you know what I mean? But
you're happy enough if they win.
And then, like, I've been lucky enough the way that it's kind of worked. I've seen the swings. I've seen quadruple trebles for Celtic, then see Rangers win a league and get to European final, and Celtic are back on top. And right now, like, why would you say anything else other than, like, Celtic are brilliant to watch? I love it, like, to watch in that regard. Definitely the best that I've seen in my time of doing the job, certainly stylistically. I like the way they go about it. It's not a big drama. I don't care if they win or not. You know what I mean? I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to.
I think that is something. The neutrality is probably the best thing for it. Do you find it difficult at times though? Like when callers sometimes will make ridiculous statements. Do you find it difficult to just sit there and go, right, well, I think this is what he's meaning or she's meaning, or do you ever just feel like going, what are you talking about?
No, not to be honest. That is quite in my nature. To be honest, I like to be quite analytical. I like to. My wife probably hates it. I like to really care about the words people use. So like, well, what do you mean by that? And I'll do that to her sort of thing. But it's just in my nature, and it's not to be a smart arse about it. Or I just think, let's say exactly what we mean. And then back it up, and then that's fine. I'm not that bothered. And I think what will happen is it's obviously very, very loaded, right? So if you come on with whatever it is, right? I think my team's been cheated, whatever. I think what you've got to remember is a lot of people basically just want you to agree with that. So see, as soon as you don't even need to go as far as to disagree, but as soon as you say, but what about that? Then all of a sudden you've got a red cross through your name. You didn't agree, so that you must be the other. And then maybe I don't know if this gets quite deep, but I think that's Scottish, Glasgow football is that in a nutshell. I think life's a wee bit like that just now as well. I think everything's like, it's really polarised. So like if I think even over, and I'm going to go way off on a tangent, you'll be well sorry here, but like it feels like everything is so polarised. If you think back to issues about independence, it's almost like you're that or you're that, and then if Brexit is like you're that or you're that, and then like Trump rose to prominence, it's like you're that or you're that, and I like the nuance, the middle ground, like gets really lost. So I do find that a little bit challenging, because there'll be loads of times where all I'm trying to do is pick whatever the view is, and maybe try and just bring it slightly back towards the middle, but that's seen as totally disagreeing with what's been said. I think in life, like we're getting a bit conditioned like that now to just see everything in black and white.
I think polarised is probably the best phrase to use, where, like you're saying, independence, Brexit, Trump, is there definitely things where I think because the internet's so prevalent as well, that people who would never had a platform before can be so extreme. And like with my work, I see it where if I turn up to something, I'll get told one thing by somebody and one thing by another, and I know generally it's in the middle somewhere. It's a bit of a grey area. So I do find that can be quite difficult, and particularly Celtic and Rangers, you don't get any more, in a sense, opposite.
Totally,
but
that's it.
Being pretty similar at the same time. Which,
but that is the irony of it, because it comes in waves again. Like if people feel that if you're talking about neutrality on one issue, what you've got to remember is if you tune in and you listen, you'll be caught up in that one moment. And I know people do listen regularly, but you'll be kind of mostly focused in that one moment. I've done this for 6 years, so I have genuinely seen it all. Whereas, you know, I remember at the time of so like lockdown, season being ended, Celtic are champions. Like my Twitter around that time is constant, like you're closet Celtic, because Rangers fans felt aggrieved. But I've just seen every other which way. So whether it's, you know, then if Celtic fans feel they've been aggrieved by a refereeing decision, and heaven forbid I try and sort of, but what about that? But do you think maybe he's looked at it that way? But is it not? Then that means you're a closet. So, but I've seen it all. So I'm not in that. I'm not just thinking about it in that one night or that 1 week or that 1 month. I've got this 1,500 show back catalogue of I've seen it all, I've heard it all, I've heard your accusations, I've heard your suspicions, and you can't both be right.
On the decisions where Celtic are regularly cheated with penalties, like I think that that must be quite a difficult issue for you. Like you see the one at the weekend there, Greg Taylor handball. For me, it's a penalty. But then you get like, I'm in a group chat, there's 11 of us for school who still see each other regularly, and there's like 80s are Celtic fans, one's an Aberdeen fan, and the rest don't like football really. And we get too caught up saying, oh well, this is happening, you get goals and handball and stuff. But see, when you start to look at it individually, you're like, I can't argue with the Taylor one at the weekend. But then you want to moan about, because it's them, I want to moan about that.
Yeah.
Do you find that quite a difficult subject, or is it something that you quite like, that's controversy that you get to talk about?
Yeah, I think I've always said this is like, it's just about everything on the show and life, whatever. I'm always about striking balance, always. So it's not lost on me that controversy over refereeing decisions is like the currency of Superscoreboard, but I don't want it for 2 hours.
Aye.
That's always it for me. It's always just a balance, and we could do that. We could easily do that. So that's where you've got a editorially, or like you've got a thought of what makes people phone is not the same as what makes people stay with you for 2 hours. And that's another thing that I think, again, maybe you wouldn't think about on the outside. I wouldn't have thought about it as a listener, because people will always say, you're only saying that to get people to phone in. Getting people to phone in is only one part of it. Can it make people listen for 2 hours? That's actually more important, probably. I hope not, but in theory, an episode of Superscoreboard could exist with 4 callers, maybe. It doesn't matter what the number is. The real aim is to keep people listening for the 2 hours. That's the real aim. So you don't want 2 hours of that hit his hand, not never, it did, not never, it did, not never. Now it'll make people phone. Phone lines will be jammed, but how many people have turned off? Because they've heard it for 2 hours. They don't need it. So that's a constant balance. So I like the controversy for sure. I'd be lying otherwise, but just the right amount.
Who makes the decisions? Like obviously you've got your producer, and if you're getting, say, there's a Celtic or Rangers decision at the weekend, it's a big news that's going to be the main topic. But who makes the decision? Do you have any input on saying, like, during the break, can we get a call? And if there's any calls for such and such a point, can we bring that in? Yeah,
I mean, nowhere near as like sinister as people would have you believe that is, of like, you're picking the calls. It's like, well, obviously, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else a phone in would work. If 20 people are phoning at the start of the show, they were obviously going to need to be right. Give me that guy. Give me that guy. But it's not. It's a bit more. It's a bit more fly by the seat of your pants. Like roughly, like say it's like, right, we've had 3 calls on saying Michael Beale's a dud, and then there's another guy I've seen phone in saying I want to stick up for Michael Beale. Right, okay, let's do that. Let's do a bit of balance. But it's not as like, I don't have time to think about it that much. I think some people would have you believe that you've got it all, counted out. It's like one guy answering the phone. He's dealing with all sorts. I'm speaking on the show, listening to the callers, making sure they're not swearing or whatever, checking Twitter, playing out interviews. So it's a brief minute. There's a bit of thought where it's like, yeah, give me that. For a bit of balance, I go and give me that. Or like, this guy's really passionate. Aye, good, that'll sound good. So it's kind of like that. So there is thought, but not to like a level where you've got loads of time to kind of plan it.
You must get some mad calls. I think this possibly was before your time as being the host. A boy I used to play, I played at Maryhill with my game actually, and played at Port Glasgow, and boy Jasper, who is the most mental person I've ever met in my life. And I remember he phoned up and he was looking to speak to Hugh Keevins, and everything Jasper does is a joke. It's just a wind up. And he gave a point, and Hugh Keevins, in his voice, gave it back an answer, and Jasper is a scheme boy for the Port, and he just kept going at him. And then it got to the stage where Jasper had nothing else to say, and he went, "You're a weapon."
You know the guy that said that?
I know Jasper. I know. I played him.
I feel starstruck.
"You're a weapon." He's like,
"Amazing.
I'm a weapon." He's like, "Aye."
I'm a weapon. I've heard the clip a million times. You know him.
I played him.
I feel starstruck. Get me that guy's. Give me his autograph.
Honestly, when we played at Maryhill, we were playing Lark Hall away.
That would have been likely.
So there, we were basically sitting. It was like winter time, freezing cold. We're sitting in the dressing room, and you know what it's like Larkhall's because it's an old ground. It's a bit like Damage, places you go where it's the concrete flooring.
Yeah.
You're sitting there freezing, and they had the dance music on in the dressing room, and it was like proper hard trance type stuff. And we had this bright luminous orange goalie top, and Jasper's, and he's had his shirt and tie on. He's like, he's that. Stuck it on, went into their dressing room. They're all sitting, the speakers in the middle, and he started dancing around every single one of them. And they were just looking at him. That's the kind of guy he is. He's just, he's honestly mental.
I've often wondered who that guy is. That's brilliant.
Jonathan Donnelly, that's his name.
Good, I'm going to remember that. If he phones in again, I'll hang up. In fact, I'll tell him I won't, I'll get him on.
No, I would not. He said to me for a laugh, we played in a Legends tournament thing for Port Glasgow last year, and he said to me, get me on your podcast. And I was like, absolutely no chance. I would never have you anywhere near it.
So that kind of thinking, Andy, every time Andy Halliday's in, he's always like, oh, my mate's trying to play Beat the Pundit, or like, I think his mate did play one night, and then some other guy, he says, is trying to phone, and then like Dougie Emery phoned in last week to play against Marvin Bartlett at Beat the Pundit. So like, there always has people like kind of trying to get involved, which is quite good fun. It makes it
Dougie's an angry man. I played at Clyde with him.
Did you? I
actually have a story about becoming about me now.
Right.
I had a story with Dougie. So Celtic, I think it was Celtic reserves played at Broadwood. So this would have been 16, 17 years ago. They played at Broadwood, and it was before the gym was built at the back. So when a shot would go over the fence and the ball would go away. So we had been training in the morning. We went in and watched the game. 2 of the kind of 100-pound mitre balls go over the fence. Dougie goes round and gets them and hides them in the bush right at the front door. So I knew he'd hid them. So I went and took them and put them in my car and drove away. And the next day I was in like one of the YTSs in the away dressing room, and Dougie comes in and he's like, what one of you took the ball yesterday? We're like, I don't know what you mean, Dougie. He's like, who took it? I don't know what you mean. And we all started, because Dougie's a nice guy, he's quite angry. So we all started barking at him. And like, we were the worst YTs in the world. We just started barking at him. And he's like wanting to fight with us and left. Eventually, I put the balls back, but I thought he was going to leather me for
that. That day when he came on, he lost. He just took his medicine. Big Marvin slaughtered him, let him have it for getting beaten. He was good. He's done a great job at Morton as well.
Excellent job. What are some of the most mental calls that you've had that stick in your mind?
Listen, it's usually every time they swear. Obviously, I think I probably told it on your podcast last time, but it's always worth another whirl. Was the boy that came on and he was like bemoaning the lack of fight in the Rangers midfield or something like that, and then he was just like, he's like, pains me to say it, but we need a Scott Brown. He's like, I'm not saying I like the and he just, I was like,
bye.
Like, and that was a disaster, that one, because we cut it out. Like I dropped the call sort of thing, the 8-second delay that stops the swearing being broadcast, but it got left in the podcast, and the producer got his balls told for that, thinking it like the Sun were about to run a story on it, like the digital stories now, like they'll write a story about anything. So the headline was going to be like, Superscoreboard call Scott Brown a C asterisk.
When that's no the context he's meant in. I
remember
a
couple of weeks ago as well, as an Aberdeen fan, like just out of nowhere, it's like late in the show as well, and I'm just like going through them with the beat with Darvel or whatever, and like, Charles, how does it feel to be an Aberdeen fan tonight? And he's like, fucking embarrassing. And I'm just like,
Bye, Charles.
And he goes, sorry. And I'm like, right, like it has to go. And there's times I wish you could just let it play, sort of thing.
Because people can appreciate that, but I understand at that time that you can't have that. I remember a guy phoning in, and it's just a West of Scotland comment, and there was name malice meant in it, and it made it onto the air, and he's like, I can't remember who he was talking about, but it was like, say for talking sake, it was, I'll use Jota and Barisic as the examples. And Jota's absolutely raped Barisic. You're like,
that's no.
I just felt that's pretty much what everybody did.
Alan Pardew did that Match of the Day. I think he got major problem for that. No, I'm not daft enough. That would be gone in a second for sure. That one would be. There's another one as well. Boys to Gordon Dale. He's like, listen to me. You think you'd fucking manage Real Madrid? It was amazing. And the thing is, they always just make me laugh. The worst is if when I'm in with Gordon and Mark and somebody swears, it always seems to be them, because we all just laugh. If it's like two more serious pundits, I'm like, just drop it and then we move on, and I'll be like, I think we lost. I think we lost Paul there. That's why I'm giving my secret away. See if you ever hear me go, I think we've lost Paul there. That's they've sworn. Or if it's Mark and Gordon that's in, just burst out laughing.
It's brilliant. Something that's been interesting for myself with loving the kind of West of Scotland old juniors football is Is that something you quite like now that you have a proper pyramid in place with the clubs being licensed, that you're starting to see Darvel's different? I suppose that's one of the biggest shocks ever in Scottish Cup history, but now you're getting more clubs in, and I appreciate you being in Clydebank is local for when Clydebank were playing like Elgin and Annan and stuff. Is that something that you all quite enjoy?
Love it. It's great. I mean, I'd always love to do more. It's just so hard when you're on the treadmill of Celtic and Rangers a lot. But I remember like we've done Roosters at the start. We had winter breaks and stuff. We did like kind of grassroots weeks, and then we would get like lots of people for amateur football, junior football, and I'll always just try and keep an eye. So it's great when you can like, when it's easier to justify. That sounds really harsh, but like with Darvel, then it's great because like how could you in fact, I mean Darvel is not in the west of Scotland. Aberdeen is not in the west of Scotland. Darvel are obviously it's in the west, but you know what I mean, it's not Glasgow in the west. Sorry, Aberdeen isn't, and yet that was like that led the show. So that was that big. So that was great to be able to do that. And again, we will always, if it is Clydebank, and we shamelessly did it with Drumchapel as well. If it's either of them, we'll play on the fact that Hugh goes to the Bankies, or he's, because his family genuinely do now, his grandkids go, and he was born in Drumchapel. So these things like help, and I love it, because there's just so many like good stories that you kind of, and that's why you guys do such good work, like shining the spotlight where we can't probably that often. So it's great when we get the chance to sort of do it, and whatever guys that might be, and I think it's probably the stories that need to carry it. I'd love to get to a stage where Superscoreboard was so wide ranging that like we could sort of read out all the results on a Saturday afternoon, and it's just so hard to fit it all in.
You've got 71 teams I think in the West of Scotland League alone, and that's 6th tier and down, so I appreciate that.
And then you would have that challenge of like, so if you take the West of Scotland like Premier, we are a local radio station, so then you would be looking at, okay, right, you couldn't just focus on that league, because what if there's like teams that are in the division below that are on your patch? So what would we do? Would we give Auchinleck more attention than
Drumchapel?
Exactly, right. And then it's like, well, yeah, because it's a better story, but it's an earshot and we're a local station. There's a lot going on, but I love the chance if we can. I used to like, if I don't get any now, but when I was out reporting and I was starting my career, I wouldn't maybe be needed every week. And then if Motherwell weren't playing, I'd love the chance to just go and watch whatever. I was like, and it would always be pure tenuous. It'd be like somebody we went to school, we played with Rob Roy. I remember that, and we'd go and watch Rob Roy quite a bit. Then at that time, I remember watching Shots a lot the year that they won the cup.
Scottish 2012.
That was just, again, I can't even remember what that was. It was like somebody's dad or somebody was in the coaching staff, I think, went and watched them, like that sort of thing. So it always like,
I think there's a nostalgic thing in the West of Scotland with junior football where people love it, and it is good that you are able to shine a light on it, because it is of interest to people, but I suppose you could never completely go away from Celtic and Rangers. That's basically what it is. On your own football, you're saying
no, that doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
It's not worth talking about.
When it did exist, who did you play with? What was your kind of Saturday morning level?
Honestly, not like, so, I mean, really, I had a weird, like, I think I fell out. So when I was, like that, I'm nowhere near that annoying guy that's like, I could have made it if I had a serious knee injury. No, I'm not that deluded. So I remember being like, good, if that was a phrase, at like end of, like through primary school, the end of primary school into high school. And I was in at Motherwell at that age, at 12. That's like it, honestly. And that was like, it's funny because now that I'm really aware of how that all works, like I like to pay attention. And I've got a really good memory, right? So I remember like everything so vividly. This must have been at like the absolute start of like trying to kind of make things a bit more professional or whatever. I remember they'd like hand you a Nutrigrain bar as you were like into the dressing room, like and up in the South Stand at Fir Park. And it was like, Mark Reynolds, his dad Brian was the coach. I always remember that, Mark Reynolds' dad. And I think Chris McCart I think he was coming in as the head of Motherwell's academy. It wouldn't even have been called academy at that time. Do you know what I mean? And it never got going. I think basically, and I'm obviously quite small now, I think at that maturation age, if that's even a word, of teenage boys, that's when I just was like, I'm too, like, I went from like felt like I was good at playing football to just being like tiny and couldn't keep up with all the big boys sort of thing, and disheartened with it. And then kind of came back, like every day you grow up, so then started just playing I probably gave it a big miss between that 13, 14. So when I get let go at Motherwell at that age, and honestly, it feels embarrassing even talking about that because it's not a thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like so young that it's not a thing. But I just kind of wrapped it then. I played with Jerviston Boys Club in Motherwell at that point for a bit. Just wrapped it, wasn't that bothered. And then kind of went back to like 19. But by 19, you're then not good enough. You're not good enough to play anywhere. So I'm under no illusions about that. So it was like, right, what kind of level can I find here? And I still kind of played. So I needed something Saturday morning, obviously, because I go and work in the afternoon. And I get roped into, without speaking too much about my religious beliefs, which don't exist at all. I get roped into playing Churches League football, and then I still kind of do. I'm still involved. I mean, I'm made of chocolate these days, and I'm working, so I just like turn up and watch now. But that's great because it's like Saturday morning, and it was kind of weird because I was like, "What's this all about?" And I go and like none of the boys go to church or whatever. It's just like they just want to play on a Saturday morning. So that was just I'm still kind of involved at that kind of level.
I think that's something that's good about football is that because there's so many people play, you find levels like now I've got no cartilage in my knee. I don't but I play a Saturday morning occasionally for my local team to help my mate out. But on your talking about the Nutrigrain bars, it's funny because I remember that when I played with St Mum's, that's what we used to get was a Nutrigrain bar because that was super healthy.
As well.
I mean, it wasn't packed full of sugar. It was super healthy. See, being in, what age are you?
33.
Right, so you're a couple of years younger than me. Being in back then, it was pro youth and stuff, and now it's the academies. Something that I find difficult is you're talking about, you realise at 13, 14 when you're leaving there that it's not a big deal. And I was fortunate enough to go through until 18, 19 at that level. But I think people get too caught up in thinking that it's massive. And something I find funny, like I don't know if you see it on Twitter, and it's nice for kids, but see like when you have them sitting, like they're signing with a club and they're sitting and you're like
age 9.
Like what kind of, that's nice for the family, but that's no a huge deal. Like you're still far too young for that to be important. What's your views on something like that?
I think it's probably just symptomatic though of the way people live their life, isn't it? Like I'm on social media like everybody else. I put up pictures of my kids, so I kind of get it. I don't think it's done out of any badness. It's in fact it's the opposite. Do you know what I mean? If people are putting up pictures of their kids on the first day at school, and they're putting pictures up of their kids riding their bike, and they're putting pictures up of their kids in the bath, and which people do. You're going to put a picture up of your kid when they've signed for Celtic or Rangers or Mother. Do you know? You just are. But then, like you say, it becomes this. It's like maybe don't even realise they're putting this like pressure on. So that's actually that is probably a really unfortunate collision of people living their lives on social media too much and people putting their eggs in this professional footballer dream basket, and you see those two worlds collide because I see it all the time as well, and I'm just like, wow.
I think it's nice for families to have that memory. But like I've got a son, he's going to be 4 soon, and like I never played at a brilliant level. I was fortunate enough to play at a reasonable level, but that's something in my mind where I think that's symptomatic with some of the issues we have. Like I don't know if you see it with your team, the boys wear the grip socks.
I totally. Do you know what's funny, right? So last week I had this, like I say, more often than not now, I'm just like working in the afternoon, legs feel crap. I just go and watch now. I basically don't even, I can't remember last time I played. And last week there was a brilliant one because I'm standing at the side and the boy in opposition had the grip socks, right? But a pair of Puma Kings, and I was like, "That's what a contradiction this is." He's gone
clash of generations.
It's got to be right. If you're going to cut your socks, tape them, and put the grip socks, you've got to be wearing a pair of Vapors or something. You can't be having that. It was mad. Boys totally do that.
Because that's something that it's funny that you say Vapors, because that was the first pair of boots that are in my mind. Because I don't know what else you would be wearing now. But that stuff like that bothers me with football. Where like I used to manage an amateur team; they were pretty decent. And boys would be like, I'm going to cut socks up. I'm like, you cut the socks up.
You pay for it.
You're getting leathered. Like I've played my whole life and never slipped about in my boots. I don't understand that stuff. I think that's like kids are getting too brainwashed with that. Like Ronaldo, because he cut his socks. Yeah. Like that's a lot of nonsense. Like socks are socks.
I know we had this discussion in the show actually, because obviously it was like Raskin did it or something, but major like he cut them, like, and we were asking Andy about it, and he's saying that pretty much everybody does it. And then I'm like, why? So if Umbro is your Hearts kit supplier, like, why did they not just have the grippy bit on the football sock? Because he was saying that like Umbro that actually now send out it's the sock without the foot. It's like a leg warmer. I was like, it's bizarre. But there's so much feeds into that, and I do feel quite strongly about like the way football can be like a force for good. Do you know what I mean? Like amateur football, grassroots football. I still love that. I love that feeling. That's the whole pot. So that's the thing. So even now, so my wife will be like, "What? So you're not playing football anymore, but you're just going to go and watch?" And I'm like, "But that's where I'm going to go and see my mates.
Aye.
Even if it's 10 minutes before, 10 minutes after, shout at the ref and moan for about, and then wish I was still playing. And then it just gives you something. And for kids, it's like last week we were playing at the Palace grounds.
Aye.
And so watching there, and the pitch behind was what must have been, I think they would have been 11 because they were playing 11-a-sides, but they looked really young. So it must have been the first sort of entry into 11-a-sides, 11, 12-year-old. And I couldn't stop thinking about it all night. I was so depressed at like the way I could hear the coaches.
It's hard.
And I said this on the show, but I didn't go full. I wasn't being a grass about it or anything. I don't know who the teams were. I didn't mention it. I didn't even mention on the show where it was. So I've spoiled it there. And I actually know somebody at the SFA who's kind of in charge. And I just, like I say, I wasn't grassing them because I didn't give any details. I just texted them like, man, I was so depressed at that. And it was like the way they were speaking to the kids, the way they were speaking to the ref. The ref was a teenager as well, a young boy. And the way they were, then there was two coaches like squaring up to each other head to head. And I was just like, what? It was really bothering me because people who listen to Super Scoreboard will know I like arguing. That's like my main character flaw. And I'm like, right, it's obviously not your place to get involved. You're just going to make it worse.
Nah.
Behave yourself. Like, I was desperate. Like, it's like, what are you doing? Especially when they're like, they were giving the ref, like, are you blind? And because it was a corner or a goal kick. And I'm like, my God, this kid's a kid. The ref, fair play. I don't know if this is what they're told, right? So the wee boy comes over and he books the coach. And I thought, good on you, right? Because he had to walk all the way over, halt the game, walked over, booked him. And there was a mum as well there. And I'm just thinking, like, if that was my wife, there was a mum who was like sarcastically, like, kind of laughing and cheering when the wee boy booked the coach. And then when the two other coaches were kind of going head to head, there was a parent like filming it, and I was just like,
that's horrible, isn't it?
So bad.
What message does that pass to children? It's like that stuff's no new. I mean,
exactly. That's
when
the problem.
we played, I suppose it probably isn't even just a thing for the west of Scotland. It'll be everywhere. But I agree. I think that stuff is horrible, and it's not really got a place. It's particularly difficult with kids. It doesn't really matter, does it? Like, it's good for them to know how to win and all that, but I don't think it overly matters. I've just had something that came into my mind there, so we're talking about the grip socks. The new one that gets me is cutting the back of your sock for your calf.
I know, I've heard this. So I asked Tony, I know Tony Watt like relatively well, and I remember asking him, sitting having a coffee one day, and I asked him, and he said his calves are too big. And he does have massive calves, but I don't know the sports science behind that. I remember speaking to a physio about it who was like, nah, I'm not convinced, because if anything, usually the compression would stop you getting cramp, but then I'm sure these boys say that it makes their calves feel tight if the socks are too tight.
It's just a lie.
I know, it's weird, eh? I definitely don't have that problem. My socks would fall down. I definitely don't have the two, but that's a weird one as well. It just looks bizarre.
I played my local team's Erskine, and I played against a team called Clyde recently, and I had a bit of a run-in with one of their players, and Eddie's the kind of cutting his socks, and I was just like, oh, this is the only thing I have on you right now. I was like, what's going on with the socks, mate? He says, what's that? So I don't get cramp. Up here, you're playing Saturday morning in a nonsense league, like, and you don't have big legs. Like, see, any of the guys when like Hugh Evans, or I suppose even like Kenny Miller, because Kenny's an older guy now in terms of football. Do you ever chat about anything like that on the show, or is it something you ever speak about off air?
No, I love all that, because I think that's the stuff that really, right, my sort of, see, like, right, what's happening with Celtic, what's happening with Rangers, right? You would think that's the bread and butter. Don't get me wrong, it clearly is. But actually, I've got this mad aim where what I really want is to just talk about things that people relate to. Right, so obviously Celtic Rangers is important, but I want people who, I take so much pride when I hear from somebody who says, do you know, I don't even really like follow football, or I'm not that into football, but I love listening to the show. I love that, because I'm like, right, we've obviously managed to tick a few boxes. And for me, sounds a bit like romantic, but the beauty of like radio, right, is like, you as a listener, like, you let those people into your life, and then I try and get that back. I want you to kind of to join ours. I'm there with you when you're taking your kids to school. We're there with you when you're on your way to the gym. We're there with you if you're feeling rotten and you've just got the podcast on or whatever. So yeah, it's great and it's interesting to argue who's better out of whatever, Hatate and whoever the case may be. But actually it's, I remember we used to rub wintergreen on our legs when we played, or I remember that freezing cold changing room, and I remember if they used to wear Puma Kings. So I love that sort of thing. So we'll always like wind Gordon DL up and say, like, because he says he trained in trackies every day, and I'm like repulsed by that. I'm like,
and it's no those nice slim fitting trackies we have now.
Exactly, it's the big baggy tucked in the socks with the drill top running on with the collar, like a canvas material. So I'll always try and bring stuff like that up. I love taking people on a trip down memory lane, or me then learning, because I'll know if it's before I'm obviously relatively young in those circles. So we'll always sort of do that, and then Mark will kind of, he looks at Gordon as if like you played 100 years ago, and then Andy's like I say, the most up to date like version of that sort of thing as well.
Do you find it quite important having like Andy? I know Marvin doesn't play anymore, and now he's managing. Do you find it quite important to have a current player who, particularly somebody who has played for one side of the old firm and is very relevant with being on open goal as well?
Yeah, Andy's like perfect for that, like perfect, because it has its challenges. Andy can't slaughter a referee if he's like in the league, obviously. Do you know what I mean? They might have, he can't, like, he's not going to, he's like right now he's not going to sit and say, he won't say who will go down. It's just disrespectful. Do you know what I mean? He can't play against these guys, so it has its challenges, but way outweighed by like the positives of just like, oh no, he's a good ref. He said, you know, he can communicate with him. You get that insight. Oh, by the way, see so and so, I know that he gets all the praise in that team, but see him, he's so strong, he's so quick. So just stuff like that. It's just totally,
good insight,
totally invaluable. And like we could pick loads of current players, but as you say, Andy's well known. He's played for Rangers, so it ticks so many boxes. If there was a Celtic version of Andy Halliday out there, then that mark's kind of close because he played semi recently. And that's the thing, a lot of circumstantial. I always laugh when people will be like, you've got X amount of former Rangers players in your panel, but only X amount, and it's like, I'd love that number to be that, but it's just circumstantial. You know, Andy moved to Hearts. Andy wouldn't have done the show while he was still at Rangers. He wouldn't have been allowed.
Couldn't have.
But he moved to Hearts, and then it was something he wanted to get into. So it needs to be circumstantial. It needs to all kind of fall into place. So Mark, like I say, is the most recent. I mean, we've had Scott Allen on, who is a former Celtic player, but he obviously didn't last that long there. Big Craig Beattie did it for a bit. Gary Caldwell did it for a bit, but Gaz did it a few weeks, then got a manager's job. Big Beats did it for a bit, and then got a job at the PFA. So it's so circumstantial. Who's available? Who wants to do it? And then you're just trying to piece it all together. So that's tough. Every summer we go, any new pundits out there? Anyone we want to try? It's tough. Do you know what I mean? Just need to...
Is there any players that you would like to get on the show? Like, obviously, like you say, you get Andy, who I do think is possibly one of the best that you could have on. Is there any players that you think, he'd be quite good at this? Because you know that when they come closer to retirement, it's like for Kenny and Mark, that's where they started to go.
Yeah, you do start to look at that. It's hard. I mean, I think I'm seeing Scott Allen doing like some more stuff now, and he's getting like way more confident. I think he could be pretty good at it, and he's quieter than Andy. They're mates, but he's kind of naturally quieter. Andy's the standout one. You're looking in the league at the moment. Again, you're just looking at age. It's you know that Craig Gordon's probably not got too long left. Charlie Mulgrew did stuff during the Euros, but you just don't know if these guys go into coaching, go into management. Craig Gordon will probably play. He's like 50. Snodgrass is quite a good talker, but he seems to keep his head down and focus on Hearts. Don't see him do much media stuff. You're always just looking at guys that are towards the end. Not even for us, just generally out of curiosity. Will he start popping up on TV? Will he start popping up here, there, and everywhere? So I can't think of anyone right now that you'd be like, I'd be desperate for that. And because in take Celtic right now, the beauty of Celtic right now is all these brilliant foreign players that they've got. So they're never going to. I can't foresee Kyogo and Duke Evans on a Friday night in 10 years' time. Do you know what I mean?
No.
So. And then that's maybe part of why there's not that many former Celtic players right now, because if you think most of the guys that have played with Celtic recently, the Scottish ones are still playing mostly, and then other guys have gone, disappeared, away elsewhere, away home or away somewhere else.
I don't get the impression that Callum McGregor's going to be the type to be on the radio when his time comes as well.
And then, Scott Brown, it was the quickest transition ever, eh? There was no window to do any media, because I'm not sure it would have been his cup of tea anyway, but just stopped playing and went straight into management. So
that's fair enough. Is there any managers? I know that you've had Tommy Wright was a bit of a sticky one for you at times.
I thought he was hard working.
Is there any in particular who stuck out? Is there any instance you've had where a manager and you just thought, oh, that was tough, or that was good?
Aye. Oh, listen, I think there's loads are good and friendly and open. I think so. I found Tommy Wright like just really difficult in the sense like verging on like, I just think you've kind of been deliberately like rude. Maybe rude's a bit harsh, because I'm sure he would bristle at that, and then I need to understand more like if he's just the defeat or whatever. Like, I do get that, but I just didn't find that an easy, enjoyable environment at all. And then right now, it's nowhere near that. But I think everybody knows Ange is like is a challenge, because he's very good at like shutting down if it's a daft question or if it's something you start to know. Like, he's not going to be interested in that, and that's really tough, right? Because I do think, again, what maybe gets lost from the outside. See the person that goes to that press conference, they'll have a boss and they'll have a boss and they'll have a boss who's saying, look, I don't care, you need to ask him about blah. And so he's obviously, I've not had any bad experiences as such, but I think, you need to be on it. I'm always like, right, if you're going to ask it, just word it sensibly, that sort of thing.
See with Ange, obviously, because he does cut things down, if you're going to a press conference and you're going to ask questions, would you, obviously you're prepared regardless, but would you be thinking, right, if I ask this question, this is harder for him to shut down? Is that
totally? Yeah, but the problem is right now it's a bit difficult, because Celtic mostly still do like Zoom press conferences, and it's like you just get one question and it moves on. So it actually lends itself perfectly to the Ange baseball bat. Do you know what I mean? Whereas actually in person, that sort of stuff doesn't happen quite as much, and you can maybe follow up. Well, actually, what I meant was blah, whatever. So you would just pay a bit more attention. I was like, Strachan was famous, wasn't he, Gordon Strachan, for being like really quick, and he had some funny ones, and then you knew that he would just try and slap you down. So I was always kind of like, again, just word it carefully. Because I remember once someone asked him about like, it was just after the World Cup where they had first introduced the spray for the free kicks, and it was, some of them asked him like, what difference do you think that'll make to free kicks or something, and he was just giving, he's giving it like about to slot, and he's like, go on then, does MD know how many? The kind of way he does looking. MD in here even know how many free kicks were scored at the World Cup? And I don't know why I knew. I was sad like that, and I was just like 2 or whatever. I think it was. What World Cup would that even have been? 2014. I think like Messi and somebody else had scored a free kick. He was like, "Who are you? Where are you from? Clyde1. Very well done, Mr. Clyde1. And then he kind of warmed, and then it was like just breaking down that barrier, that sort of thing. So I guess it's all part of the fun.
You're still a young man, right, in football, in terms of Gordon Strachan and guys like that. How intimidating, particularly when you started, how intimidating is it trying to speak together like that? Because ultimately, in general terms, they know more about football than you do, and they've got the profile behind them. How intimidating is that to speak to somebody like that?
It was quite, but just sort of confidence in what you're doing, because this isn't a competition about who knows more about football. Do you know what I mean? I'm not off, and that's where I think you can fall into the trap. I don't want to offer my opinion. I don't care, and I hear a lot of that, and I'll fall into it sometimes. But like I hear a lot of that on TV, and I'm always like, when the interviewer's like, I thought you played brilliant there.
That's not what you're there for,
sort of thing. So I don't think it matters that they know more about football, because that's not what I'm here to achieve. Just sort of there to ask questions, and they might not know more about asking questions than I do, no matter how young I am. So don't get me wrong, it was even like, bear in mind when I really first started going to games, I was like 19. Now I'm baby faced at 33, so you can imagine what I looked like at 19. And then the way it would usually work traditionally, and it still does, but it was even more sort of significant back then, or even more clear, would be the radio for me or whatever would ask the first like 3 questions, and then the newspaper guys would know to leave you, let you ask the first 3 questions, and then they were allowed to sort of join in after. It's like a kind of unwritten rule. I'm not sure if it was ever an official thing. So you would go in, and I always remember like John Hughes. I don't know why that stuck out in my head. So I would go to sit down. So like all these newspaper journalists, and they're all like mates, and they're all like sticking together, and they'll be like just sitting silent, and then it's like ask the question, and then go another one, and then another one. And then John Hughes like, "Oh, aye, you young guy asking all these questions," like, and he was just being nice, but it was kind of embarrassing him about like, "Oh, aye, like great," sort of thing. So the press conference environments are intimidating anyway, but I think it's just the way it's set up. It's so confrontational, like you're sitting across the desk.
Them and us.
And then even if you're broadcast media, TV or radio, you're probably sitting in the front row, so you might have loads of people behind you, so you can feel like their eyes on the back of your head when you're asking the question, and he's staring right back at you. The full atmosphere. I'm obviously very used to it now and comfortable, but it's a very like weird atmosphere it is.
See, because it's slightly relevant to my other podcast that would do. See, fan media. What's your views on fan media and the fact that now, I think obviously COVID and stuff's helped with the Zoom, but they're more prevalent in clubs, particularly Celtic and Rangers.
Aye. Oh, that's great. I mean, listen, I've never really liked the way that like the like traditional media, mainstream media, call it what you want. I think it's really awful if I think it like you would view it as like a them and us type thing. And the only thing I would expect back though is then I don't like like I say then if it's like a them and us, that does work two ways, because I think you'll get some fan media, and I talk to all the guys at Celtic or Rangers, I'll talk to them and it's great. So what I wouldn't like to think is that they're there chatting away and then I'll still hear maybe on a podcast or you see it written or whatever that they would sort of run away back and be like kind of almost telling tales of like what's going on in the press room, or he asked that question and he's clearly got it in for us or whatever. So I think there's no reason why it can't all work in like perfect harmony, just like everything in life, just a balance. I know there's been high profile examples of like press conferences and fans asked like a proper like fan loaded tribal question, and it's a bit jarring. But nowadays, really, like you guys obviously well know, with YouTube channels and podcasts and whatever, great, bring it on, the more the merrier. But just I think as long as everybody needs to be respectful of the situation and their needs. Do you know what I mean? Like ultimately, us TV, radio, we're looking for that one really good soundbite at times. So we might have to actually get a bit repetitive. We might kind of have to ask the same question again, because I think that answer is all right, but I think you can do better here. But nowadays, with everything being streamed and blogged and whatever, a lot of press conferences are going out as like a whole, and then everyone's like, listen to these idiots all asking the same question. Sometimes we are idiots and we ask the same question, but sometimes you're actually doing it by design, you know.
So before we finish up, I appreciate earlier you said that you're not overly aggressively kind of looking for new things, but roughly where do you want to go in the next few years or in
it's
your
tough.
career?
No, I definitely don't have like yearly. I couldn't think years in advance. It's just not my style, that at all. And I appreciate that some people do. And by the way, maybe that'll mean that if Super Scoreboard's the peak of my broadcasting career, I'll be happy with that. Absolutely, honestly, I genuinely will be. So maybe some people listen like, oh, you're lazy, you're not ambitious. Like, it's not like that. I just don't have that mindset. So I'm more like, it's like people that make me tick. Do you know what I mean? That's where I get my real happiness, rather than thinking about like what my job's going to be. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, I'll give you a bit of an answer. I think probably just I'm enjoying a little bit of TV work that I'm doing. So I'd quite like to get more experience just so that I can learn new things. I feel like I've learned a lot about radio. I'd like to do that. And honestly, that's a bit as far as I think. That's really boring, eh?
No,
I'm not one of these types that's got these like plans in it. I like think like I feel like the world is full, and again, this is not wrong. It's just not me. The world's full of people who are like, dream big, aim big. You can achieve anything you want. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. You can achieve anything you put your mind to. But that's totally fine. I don't even necessarily disagree. It's just not for me. I'm sort of fine of like really basic level of like, all I really want is what happiness, whatever that is, whatever that looks like, and some of that comes through work, but not at all. So
I think that happiness and I suppose contentment is is a good way to live your life.
Yeah, because I'm not like, what's the point in me sitting saying, even if somewhere in the back of my mind, if I'm like, right, I want to be the host of ESPN in America or whatever, and then it might not make me happy. That's it. And I know straight away it just might not. So that's kind of the way I live my life. But yeah, just I suppose adding a few more strings to my bow would just keep my mind ticking over anyway, rather than just talking about Hugh Keevan's Nokia and changing nappies. I don't want those to be the only two features of my daily routine.
So Hugh does have a Nokia?
100%. Bomb-proof. Sellotape on the back and everything.
Well, we'll finish up there, Gordon. I really appreciate you taking the time with me.
Anytime.
And thanks for watching. If you could like the episode and subscribe to the channel, it would mean a lot to me. Thanks again. Cheers.